Hey everybody, I hope you're okay. I hope you're well or doing the best you can in the turbulent, challenging, different times that we find ourselves in at the moment with the constant change. So I'm recording this in the hope that it will help some of you in your relationships throughout the rest of COVID-19, especially if you're all living together in one house and spending a lot more time with people that perhaps you don't normally do, including your loved ones, including your kids or your partners or your friends or perhaps your flat housemates, and finding a way through it together. So for those of you that have never met me before and don't know anything about me, this is a little bit about my story. So in January 2018, I retired from the Metropolitan Police after 30 years service. The last decade of that, I was a hostage and crisis negotiator. And I was privileged enough to be able to share in other people's stories. And I learned so many lessons through each one of those negotiations, especially around the fact that we all have a story. And I mean by that we all have our own challenges that we're facing all the time. That we will all experience crisis at some stage in our life. And also that we all view the world from our different perspectives, from our very own lenses. And I now run 3 businesses, 4 including a training, coaching business in communication, but I use the exact same skills that I did as a negotiator with my teams and with my family and with my customers. And so I was looking at COVID and how we're kind of in lockdown and what that means for people and what would really work, what would help people to just get through each day. So I'm going to tell you a story about a negotiation that I did, and I'm going to tell you how that now reflects in my own personal life and how I implement that and the difference that it makes. So when I was a very new negotiator, I was trained in 2008, so I remember being very excited about being a negotiator, looking forward to going and talking to people and helping them and saving life. I was very excited about that. I thought that it was a real privilege and an honour to be given that opportunity to do that. And I remember it was my 3rd call as a negotiator, and I hadn't nailed it without a shadow of a doubt. I'd learned all these new skills. I'd done a 2-week course, very intensive. I'd been practicing, and things weren't working quite the way that I wanted them to work. So I turned up at my 3rd call, and the call was to a young girl in a tree who had a noose around her neck. And I arrived and it was dark, so I remember it being quite late at night. It was a summer's evening. And there was lots of other police officers around, and I went to talk to this young girl. And she refused to talk to me. She didn't even reply to anything. I was very conscious of the fact that I was talking in front of other people that were in front of me and that they were listening and waiting with bated breath. In my head, they were probably criticising or working out what they would say in a better fashion. And after 2 or 3 hours, I hadn't made any progress whatsoever. She was still walking around the tree. She still had the noose around her neck. It was very frightening. She was very high up. I didn't want her to fall or hurt herself in any way, shape or form. She was clearly troubled. Something was happening in her life that had caused her to take this action. And I remember there was a more experienced negotiator joined me after a little while. His name was Steve, a lovely guy, and he'd been a negotiator for many years. And we had a chat and we talked about what was not working, what might work, and we tried a few different things. And eventually we both agreed that I was not building a rapport with her. I wasn't getting very far with her. And in the world of negotiation, we have this saying that there is no ego. Now, there is always ego. Ego is always there. It's about recognising your own ego and how it works in your life and how it shows up. But in the world of negotiation, when you're saving someone's life, it's incredibly important to put ego to one side. So that's what we do, and we have honest conversations. And we both agreed that I wasn't getting anywhere and that he would give it a go. So he started talking to her, and after a little while, don't get me wrong, it wasn't after seconds or minutes, it was after a little while, he started to make progress. And she started to talk to him, and they started to build a relationship. And eventually she trusted him enough that she came down from the tree unharmed. Thank goodness. Brilliant. It took some time. Probably, I remember it being light when we finished, so it was probably some 7 or 8 hours of interacting with this girl. And I walked away from that negotiation. I was like, what is going on? What is not working for me? And I reflected over it many times, and I still reflect over it now, many years later. And I realised that in that negotiation, as in quite a few of my first negotiations, it was kind of all about me. It was, I wanted to do this, I wanted to do that, I wanted to use my new skills, I was aware of other people around me, and it was very focused on me. And when you come at a conversation from your perspective, it often is. And there's nothing wrong with that, and we do it all the time, but it's just about recognizing that and understanding the impact that it might have on another person, especially somebody who might be in crisis. So I'm like, okay, so how do I use that in my own life now? And I have practiced negotiation communication for many years, and I'm still learning, and it's great to continue to learn. And I try to implement it consciously as regularly as I can. That's not always easy, especially when the old emotional brain kicks in. And by that I mean, when you come at a conversation from an emotional perspective, you use words and say things that you might not necessarily say when you're looking at it in a logical approach. And when you're in an emotional state, it's harder for you to find a way forward than it is when you take a big, deep breath in, press the pause button and think, okay, how can I attack this in a logical fashion, and ask myself questions like, how can I improve this, or what can I do, rather than I can't, or I don't know how. And I'm looking at lockdown now, and as we move forward and the rules are being slightly changed and different, but many of us are still working from home, and certainly homeschooling is still going on, and this is why I'm in Meg's bedroom, just to really prove the point here. So I have a 13-year-old in my life called Meg. She came into my life when I was in my early 40s and she was 6. And I use the skills that I learnt as a negotiator with Meg on a regular basis. And she's taught me a lot. So when we're at home and all three of us are working from home, my partner included, Meg will be like on the kitchen table with all her books spread out, and she'll be listening to her lessons, or she'll be getting on with the work. The other half will probably be in this room, because this is where the big computer is, so they'll be working hard at work here, and I'll be in the back room on the laptop. So we'll all be in separate areas. And sometimes I'll walk into the kitchen thinking, right, it's lunchtime now, I'll prepare lunch, and there'll be stuff everywhere. And now the temptation is for me to say, Megan, for goodness sake, look, all your stuff everywhere. Can you please just clean it up so I can make some lunch? But I get that this is different for her as well. So I have to take that big breath, press the old pause button, and come about it a different way. And think, okay, so here's a 13-year-old who's now having to work from home, school herself from home, rather than be at school. Let's look at it from her point of view. And then if I want to do a recording or a podcast and I like to use a big computer, I'm like, okay, well, I can't get into that room, but let me look at it from my partner's point of view. And when you do that, you can rationalise things a lot clearer. It becomes more logical for you. So you can ask the questions of each other and of yourself of, how can we make this work? What can we do to improve everybody's life here and make it work? Kind of stepping into somebody else's shoes and looking at it from their point of view. When you're in an emotional state, that's incredibly difficult to do. So it's about how you manage to get yourself to that logical state. And my mum, bless her, so she's in lockdown. My dad isn't very well. He has terrible chest problems. And so we know that we have to keep him shielded, and that's going to be for some time. Now, over the last few years, I've introduced them to online shopping, which I do for them every Sunday. And then suddenly we can't get a slot. And my mum's panicking about this. Now, I have 3 businesses, all of which are at different stages during this challenging period. So sometimes I'm very caught up in that. And my mum's fretting about online shopping. And I'm like, why are you fretting about online shopping? I'm worried about employing people and keeping 3 businesses open. This just isn't like in my radar of things to worry about. But if I stop and press the big old pause button and look at it from her perspective, I can see actually it's about her losing her independence and being reliant on other people. So it's not about the shopping, but it's about the, how am I going to get the things that I'm very used to? What can I keep control of? And then when you realise that that's what's going on, you can have a nice, sensible, logical conversation of, Mum, it sounds like you are really worried about losing your independence and being reliant on other people. And the reply I got to that was, yeah, I absolutely am. I hate it. I hate being reliant on other people. I hate having to wait for an online slot or asking people to do my shopping for me. I'm very used to doing it myself. So that's what I've learned from one of the conversations, many of the conversations I've had in a negotiation, and now how I use it in a practical term. So I hope that helps you in your challenges of living life in a slightly different way, and that you'll be able to use that and think about what is happening in your world and how you can implement it. Thanks for listening, thanks for joining me, and I'll speak to you soon.